Hello, I'm JW. This time I'm going to have a look at a fairly straightforward repair, and the thing we're repairing is this, which as you can see is an extension lead. Now this particular one is pretty old. It's actually made out of metal rather than cheapo plastic, and the exact age is unknown. I didn't actually get it when it was new, and the main problem with this is that the two sockets on the front there are basically just worn out, and it's becoming increasingly difficult to actually get plugs to go in there, so I'm going to replace those and also possibly put a bit of paint on the front as well. So let's have a quick look at the thing, take the front off to see what the deal is and see what we can do with it. Now this is the thing itself, and as you can see this is fairly old. It's orange for whatever reason. That's the colour it was when I got it, which was a considerable number of years ago. So this wasn't even new when I got it either. It was being got rid of by somebody who no longer wanted it for whatever reason. Now a couple of things about this is that this is all metal. There is no plastic involved on this. This is also used on a fairly regular basis, hence why it's fairly grubby. On the back here, it's again this all steel frame here with a steel piece here. We've got this piece here which can be screwed in and out, and essentially that is just a rubber stop there so that you can either turn freely or just tighten it up, and then it doesn't move at all, so fairly useful. It's got these RCD plugs on the end. This is going to be fairly tatty and battered, but it does still work. And the flex on this is also of interest. This is 2.5mm size, so this is a lot bigger than what you buy on most extension leads today, which at best will come with something like 1.5 and even smaller in some cases. You can identify those because it will say things like only rated at 10 amps, or in some cases only 6. Those are also the ones that say do not use when it's partially wound up, which is a complete hag, because who wants to unroll 30 odd meters of flex just to use the thing? This being considerably larger can be used whilst it's wound up, because the additional heat created is so minimal it's not actually going to matter. And yes, it is the heat that causes that. It's nothing to do with magnetism, because of course there's no magnetic field here. This of course has the line and the neutral in it, current going in both directions, so there's no actual magnetic field created. Now on the front here we've got two socket outlets, and this is just an indicator, just lights up red when it is plugged in, so nothing too surprising with that. And this is a bit scratched and a bit of corrosion coming through, so this is basically what's wrong with it. These are just basically worn out, and as with all UK outlets here, they've got the shutters in the bottom. What should happen is you put the plug in, and the earth pin being a bit longer will then go in here, open the shutters so the other pins can go in. Unfortunately in these cases the actual mechanism is wearing, so that when you put that in sometimes the shutters jam in the closed position and you can't physically get the plug in, and also sometimes they've actually stuck open, which again is not ideal. That being a typical UK plug, and you can see the earth pin there is a fair bit longer than the other two, so that goes in first. But unfortunately in the case of this, it's not really going in there. That one does go in there, but again it's not a very satisfactory situation. Now I think we'll start just by undoing these screws here. These are also fairly rusty, but look like just basic wood screws actually, but anyway we'll get those out of there. And then hopefully this whole plate should just lift out of here, which it does. As you can see it's rather flaky with the paint there. The back is also not wonderful. Now we can see inside here we've got the flex just come through this hole on the side for the reel there. No real surprises here, so we've got our three conductors, the earth there to the two terminals, and the line and neutral, and that's just a little indicator in the middle there, just some kind of neon affair most likely. And you'll notice this has got blue and brown in. That doesn't necessarily mean anything in terms of its age, because although fixed wiring in the UK only changed over to this about 15 years ago, these blue and brown for appliance flexes has actually been the norm since the early 1970s, so this has basically been the standard colours for 50 years, so that doesn't tell you anything about the age of this, and that's exactly what you'd expect to find. If we did actually find black and red and green in here for this flex, then it's high time for this flex to be thrown away and replaced, because that would mean it was well over 50 years old. It will also probably be rubber insulated. This is some form of PVC, so no particular problems with that. Now let's get these things out of here. We'll just undo the various terminals, so again, nothing too disastrous. The idea is to actually repaint this metal plate as well before it goes back in. Obviously that won't be being shown in this particular video. So there we have the plate, and then just the bits of flex coming out, and then the bits that linked between the two individual outlets. Now these sockets, as you can see on the front, are made by MK. This is the old logo with the oval and then the MK letters in the middle, and they're fixed in just by a couple of screws at the top and the bottom. So again, we'll just get those out of there. Perfectly good sockets, or at least they would have been 40 odd years ago, whenever this thing was actually made, but I say unfortunately they're just basically worn out over time. So just get the two screws away. And this will just drop through at the back there, just designed to mount into a circular opening. So there we've got the various components. This is just a piece of steel, most likely, just stamped out with the various holes. I'm going to repaint that. Also I'll show you that once it's been redone. Little indicator there, just two wires. There's no resistor outside, so assuming it's got one internally. Again, nothing wrong, it does still operate. And then we have the two actual panel mount sockets there. Say MK, fairly old. See on the back it's got the old MK logo as well, made in England and so on. And we can actually replace these with new. Now, despite the fact that these are very old, probably 40 years old at least, unbelievably you can still buy the exact ones of these to fit in the holes. And here they are. Got a couple of them obviously, and these came from CVC, as you can see there. Of course other suppliers are available. So there's the two new ones, and I've just put the new by the old. You can see that they are almost the same. The most important thing is the fact that this round piece here is going to fit into the metal plate that we've got, and also the mounting screws will also line up. Slight difference on the front here, of course, we've got the slightly different logo, although it is basically the old logo, but it's in a sort of a rectangle rather than just the oval bit in the middle. And notice that the earth hole is slightly different. This has got the contacts further forward, they're more sort of open on the top there. That may just be because this is worn out and that's not. And slightly different shutter arrangement there, whereas these, when you put the pin in, it doesn't actually operate it via the pin, it's the two where you just press both, and the fact you've got both pins pressing in will open the shutter. The earth pin is not actually related to that. Old ones, you can see those have actually jammed open, which is where we can get the plug in. These have sort of jammed in a partially open and closed state, and that's obviously not very satisfactory. On the back it is quite different. This is the old one here with the black moulded material on here, so it's line neutral and earth over to the side. Similar arrangement here, of course, because obviously the holes on the front are in the same place, but on this the actual wires go in the side, and we've got the screws in the top, and they look like steel rather than the brass on this one. And then the earth terminal just down here on the side. But other than that, pretty much exact same, and it will look the same from the front, other than the slightly different logo. This one is also 250 volts. It doesn't say made in England because, unsurprisingly, it probably wasn't. In fact, it doesn't actually say where it was made, but Malaysia is quite likely. A lot of MK stuff comes from there. Certainly the plugs that go with this certainly do. Still have the old logo there. I do not put in the bin symbol, and that 13 amps, and that's pretty much it. Oh, and just said there, it does actually say they're made in Malaysia in extremely tiny writing. Just need a microscope to see that. So yeah, made in Malaysia. But again, that's no surprise with that. So those will go in, that can go back, and the plate, well, we'll see that next time, which will be in just a couple of seconds for you. It'll be all painted up and fixed up quite nice. So there's the plate repainted, just gone in a black, same as it was previously, though that obviously isn't peeling off and rusty. Done both sides, but obviously it's only the front actually going to be seeing. And painted the screws as well, same ones. They're actually wood screws, not really designed to go into metal, but they held that cover on for decades, so we'll use the same ones, just clean the rust off, and a bit of the same black paint on the top there. So in terms of reassembly then, it's pretty straightforward. This little indicator just presses through the hole there. So that's that, just the two wires on the back. And then the sockets just screw in using the two screws at the top and bottom edges. And I say these are the exact same size and dimensions and whatever else, so there won't be any problem getting these put in. And as we saw previously, these have the somewhat better shutter mechanism, which just relies on the two pins pressing here rather than that thing in the earth hole, which is what would fail on the other ones. It's basically just jammed closed in one case and open on the other one, neither of which was particularly useful. So it's a question of getting up the holes aligned, just getting the screws in there. So that's one of them, and obviously the other one goes in the same on the other side. So that's the two sockets installed there, and you know we've aligned the screws vertically and horizontally just to annoy people. And you also notice these are not quite level, that one is slightly offset, but that's just due to where the holes are located, and that would have been the same on the other one, so that's just how it goes. These holes here are just for the two fixing screws, which just drop through like that. And what now remains is to obviously connect the wiring, the indicator there, and then also the wires to the back of the sockets. Now on the reel itself I've cleaned it up quite a bit because it was rather dirty, and also cleaned the whole length of the cable apart from this bit in the middle. That was also a good opportunity to inspect the whole length of it to make sure there wasn't any damages or ruined bits, which there wasn't. Extended this here, just a question of loosening the clamp here. It's actually under the cable at the moment, but here's a picture I took of it earlier today. And this doesn't have any sort of grommet, but it is actually a shaped piece where it comes through, so it's not going to cut into the edge of it. Added this here for an earth connection because this is all steel and there was no connection to it previously, but there was no hole, so I just made one of those holes slightly larger, put in a fixing into there. And there is actually a little earth symbol on here, not very clearly, but there was obviously intended to be an earth connection fitted in here, but it was never actually done. But I've put it over here on this one in this particular case, so that's fine. So I've extended this a bit because obviously it was only very short previously. So we'll strip this back and then make some efforts at actually connecting the wiring. So I've got the various conductors out of there, and that obviously loosens the asbestos dust, which is obviously found in many cables. So just clean that away. So now we've got a decent length here to actually connect onto those sockets, and obviously our new earth connection here as well just goes onto the frame of the reel itself. It's pretty unlikely any problems would occur there, causing it to short. I mean, it's painted anyway, but nevertheless we've put it there, as that was presumably the original intent anyway. So we'll just strip up some of these wires and get these connected. Now previously it was just the wires and then an extra piece had been cut off to link the two. What I'm going to do here is just strip a section in the middle without actually cutting it, and then we can just fold that, and that will just go into the first socket, and then we'll just strip this end, which will then go into the second one. So we're going to end up with a continuous piece that actually goes between the two, and that avoids any possibility of the separate piece sort of coming undone or becoming detached, because bear in mind this is obviously going to be moved around quite a lot, so we don't want it to have any possibility of things coming apart. So we can just strip it in the middle, move the conductor along a bit there, and then basically just fold that in half. And then we've got this into the first socket, and then we've got this end here which will strip and then obviously go into the second one. So there we've got the final connection. So we've got our supplies coming here just with that folded over piece in the terminals in the middle, and then the single goes over to the side, and we've also put the connections for the neon into the two outer ones as well, so those wires are not sort of a big bundle on the back. And then the green yellow here for the earth connection just goes into this one, again folded over there, and then just into one here, and this is the one that goes back to the metal casing. And for some reason these two sockets, so they're new and both bought at the same time from the same place, have got two completely different types of terminal for the earth connection. This has got a thing with a screw on the top there, and then this one is a sort of a sideways attachment. That's also got a steel screw, and this has got a brass one, so not entirely clear what the reason for that is, but nevertheless there they are. And it just requires now to put the two screws through these holes here, obviously keeping the wiring away from those, and they just go down into the holes we've got in the base of that. And although this rotates, obviously this is rotating as a whole piece, it's not twisting the cables around as it goes. So this will just sit down in here, something like that. Now, in terms of testing this thing, there are a couple of problems. The cable obviously should be tested for insulation resistance, and I actually did this earlier before it was reassembled, and the reason for that is because of the presence of this neon indicator. And if you test at say 500 volts between the line and the neutral, this of course is going to show up as a fault because it will conduct at those sorts of voltages, so hence testing it before that. And the other problem is we've got this RCD plug on the end, which by its nature only connects the pins here to the actual cable when it's actually energized, as when you plug it in you have to press the reset button to turn it on, and you can also use the test button to make sure that it still trips. So if we tested between here and here now, you'd find there was absolutely nothing there because the relay in this thing is of course not energized. So there are a few challenges with this. You couldn't just plug it into say a PAT machine or whatever and just test away, because it's not going to give you any kind of results that you would want. So the cables, let's say I did the installation test like before, that was fine, and so I also inspected the whole length of it for any kind of damages or defects or whatever, and there wasn't any. Now, even though that neon is there, we can still check the connection from the earth pin through to the metal parts here of the sockets, just to make sure those are connected correctly. So we're going to use this thing here for continuity, just the two leads there. Now we'll zero these leads out first so we don't obviously measure the leads themselves, so 0.18 apparently in that case, and that should now measure as 0. So we'll just connect onto the earth pin there, and then we'll just go over to the screws here, should be fine. So 0.21 ohms, and this one is basically the same, 0.20. Yeah, 0.2 depending on how hard you press on that. And then we should be able to also get something from the metal frame as well. I'm going on this leg here because the paint is fairly worn off, although how good this is going to be to get in through the rusty bits is not clear, but we'll have a go. Yeah, it's not too bad, so 21 again, similar sort of reading, which is what you would expect. So that's fine, and that was obviously missing previously, so obviously when it was made they didn't bother to put that connection in. Now the other test we'll do, which will confirm that it's actually connected correctly here, and also give us some idea of the quality of the connections between, we can actually use this to do a loop test on this, basically between the line and neutral and also to the earth as well. So this particular machine is fairly old and does have a zero facility for this as well, so we'll just use this shorting adapter here and just zero that. So that just removes the resistance of this lead we're using. Now I've got the mains connection here on this temporary lead, which is plugged in somewhere there. So we'll plug in there, and at the moment it's going between line and neutral, so we'll see what we get with that. So 0.72 there, that's fairly reasonable because we're at the end of a fairly lengthy extension lead here anyway. Now if we plug this in to this, we'll use the same hole we had before, and then we can turn it on using the reset button, and the little light comes on obviously because the indicator there, and then if we plug this into our socket we can do again, so 72 there and 118 with that, and that's of course because of the resistance additionally of the wires we've got around there. And we'll check the other one as well. I should expect that to be pretty much the same. Yep, exactly the same, so again that's fine. We can also check the line to protective earth conductor there as well, so we'll just check here, which again should be takes a bit longer because it also has to use a much lower current. These are not necessarily as accurate as the high current test, but anyway, 0.9 there, and again we would expect this to show something rather more, basically because it's adding in the length of the complete length of the extension there. So 137 again, that's fine, and we could do it there again. It's going to be, certainly expect it to be about the same. .138, so again that's perfectly fine. So that's absolutely all right. So pretty much what you would expect to find there. Just remember how to turn that thing off. And then this thing, if you press this test button, it should just turn this thing off, which it does. So again, that's absolutely fine. We could supposedly test this with the RCD function, but not really a whole lot of point in doing that. This is a fairly old one, as you can see, and it's also a type AC, which is not obviously appropriate now for a lot of types of load, but bearing in mind this is extension lead, the only things plugged in the end of this are things like drills and other power tools most of the time, vacuum cleaner, whatever, so type AC is perfectly fine for that. And although this wasn't the case when this was originally put here, most properties now go to will have RCDs on the circuits in most cases anyway, so again, not a problem. So that is pretty much it for this particular video, and say this thing will be going back into the van so it can be used for its intended purposes. So I'm not going to repaint the orange parts because there is obviously some damage here, but that's just basically where it's been put on the floor and obviously put up against other objects. Nothing too bad with that. And although it has a little bit of surface rust, again, not a problem. It's not something that's used outdoors or is likely to get any worse. So until next time, thanks for watching.